The Studio Shangri-La podcast is back. And this episode is titled Philosophy and Culture, Self-Image, Learning, and Creativity. Philosophy, after all, goes hand in hand with culture. What are the ways that we can examine ourselves and environment in order to advance and evolve? What are the whys? Are we asking the whys that help the culture at large evolve? And what is the culture at hand? Is it one of expansion and exploration? Or say, is it to do as one's told and follow the patterns already laid out? Of course, that has its place when you just need to get something done. But what is the larger influence and flavor of the culture of one's environment or surroundings? And closer to home, within oneself. What is that which we are cultivating within ourselves about what is possible for us and our surroundings? My original influence to go in a direction of a topic like this is the famous book Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. It's from the 60s. It was in that wave of initial self-empowerment books. Cybernetics being a word related to Greek origin, to do with navigation. And cybernetics being a word that refers to systems that have causal feedback loops, processes that are circular, that are adjusted as they go along, like the navigation of a ship through the ocean, or like the navigation, yes, of one's life, in which you have to make course adjustments and corrections as you go along in order to get the desired results. And of course, the more deliberately that one can learn how to do this, the better. Like navigating the sea voyage. Of course, there are waves that come along with unexpected strength sometimes. And sometimes, even though the waves look dangerous, it may actually get us farther by navigating them. That's a long way of bringing us to the first word in the subtitle, which is self-image. The way of perceiving oneself, the way of looking at oneself, which is a very powerful construct indeed, and ideally a malleable one. The ideal place to come from, in my opinion, is that regardless of status or station or anything like that, that it's ideal to view oneself as capable of doing and learning anything. Of course, this is not always the case. And sometimes there are a lot of stumbling blocks and blockages to overcome in order to get to this point. There's the programmings of personality via environment and influential people in one's life. There's the larger sculpting of one by one's environment. But then you truly start to take the wheel and start navigating when you become aware of your programming and where it comes from, such as one's upbringing. And some of this is very productive, and then some of it might not be, or might be quite counterproductive. My feeling is that anything that stands in the way of believing in one's open-ended possibility and potential, anything that stands in the way of that empowerment is a hindrance to be overcome. And how do I see myself as capable of anything? And at times that might mean tuning out messages that I've heard before, false messages, or even exaggeratedly overblown messages. And I have to come to the point of balance and calm at my truth, which, in my opinion, is the truth of all human beings. Let me reiterate that one can learn anything and one can accomplish anything that one earnestly desires. That is, that it causes true fulfillment and joy to pursue what that is. And it furthers the evolution and positive development of self. Self-image. When I look at myself, what is it that would keep me from doing something that I want to do? And it would be short-sighted or limiting thoughts and beliefs, many of which would come from the outside. And we're at a very fortunate point in human evolution of the expansion of self-awareness to where we can even identify these things. That Maxwell Maltz was able to write such a book like Psycho-Cybernetics. Of course, there's a long history at this point of philosophical tradition. And quite fortunately, it continues to expand with our growing awareness, bringing us back into the unifying possibility that, yes, of course it is possible for us to keep evolving, and then to keep evolving as individuals. If there's something I want to do, I can do it. It's just a matter of breaking it down, perhaps into steps, and to see or visualizing the possibilities, feeling the possibility, and believing in that, rather than believing in the limitations, the limiting thoughts, and that narrative. To coming into the possibility of self-image and the expansion of self-image, I have to tune out the fear and anxieties, the limiting beliefs. Breaking it down like that, it sounds quite simple, but of course, it's an ongoing maintenance process and an ongoing re-centering, re-grounding, coming back to that ground level of the one. I am the one, and I can experience the breadth of life. So if I have an expanded self-image that goes outside of the trivia, if you will, of my life, if that expanded self-image has come back home to the one, then I know that I am fully capable of learning whatever it is I need to learn to experience and create my desires. That I have the ability to learn about, absorb, and understand whatever it is that I want to learn about. Could be from physics to music to anything technology to crafting to public speaking to game playing, whatever it is, sports, whatever it is. It becomes so much easier to learn when the ground state is I can. And I suppose it can be a little jarring for one when you think of how many times perhaps you've been told you can't, or it's been suggested in so many ways, or coming to see that there have been these perhaps sort of artificial barricades in society or within oneself. The perception of artificial barricades. Oh, I can't go there for whatever reason. And I'm not talking about ethical questions here. I'm talking about realizing one's best self and doing productively what one wants to do, or experiencing the life one wants to live, enjoying life. Even better, enjoying life. There can be artificial barricades of I can't go there for whatever reason, which is probably equally as ridiculous. And I say this with affection because it happens. It can happen to all of us. It's just as a result of our burgeoning intelligence and awareness, I think. I can't go there. I can't enjoy this. Because I've got all this work to do. I should be not enjoying myself and working more. I can't go over there and do that. I've got all this other work stacking up. Or something to that effect. Or I can't go learn about that. I'm this kind of person. I'm in this culture. Or I'm of this socioeconomic status. I'm not going to go do that. And those are all artificial barricades. Of course, it might not be quite so well verbalized as what I just said there. It's rather an identity, a feeling, and that's when it comes back to self-image. And how the self-image can direct one's path. For better or for worse. Or really, sometimes a blend of the two, because life, right? But overall, ideally, for the better. When one becomes aware of all the options available, such as it is now, people are becoming more aware of options and possibilities for themselves outside of the strictures of some of the things I was just mentioning, like socioeconomic status, culture, gender, race, sexual preference, leanings toward this or that subject, leanings toward this or that department, or occupation. Oh, I've got to stay in my lane. Well, not necessarily life-wise, of course, because life is multidisciplinary. Life is not boxed into any one category. Of course, one's job might be, there might be a function to stay in one's lane at times. But philosophically, one can be quite free and realize the importance of multidisciplinary, so to speak, because that's kind of a buzzword right now, as it well should be, of multidisciplinary living, or multifaceted, is really how I think of it. Multifaceted, multidimensional, because that's what it is, and increasingly so. For example, you could have a branch of science or study that's actually a combination of multiple branches. And so, in order to be involved in it, you actually have to immerse yourself in several different fields of study. And that's just how it is. It's easier to learn when you open yourself up to the possibilities of the interconnectedness, well, of all things, right? And it can be only overwhelming in the best possible way. Coming back home to the one. And then, of course, you can branch back off from there. But the point is, you know of all your branches, and you know of your tree. You know your roots. You can always come back and branch off in a different direction if you want. And that's creativity. Creativity is not boxed in. You don't have to be a sculptor, literally. You don't have to be a cubist painter. If you get my drift, you don't have to work in a specific medium to be creative. The crafting of life itself is creative. How we steer our ship is creative. Cybernetics. The navigation of processes and the adjustment of that navigation in order to make adjustments and achieve objectives and achieve happiness and contentment. Creativity is the navigation of that ship. As you've taken the helm and you're deciding to go in one direction or the other to see what happens. And then, depending on that, make an adjustment. Creative minds are all minds. And you don't have to take a paintbrush to canvas to be considered creative or to consider yourself creative. All you have to consider yourself creative is to exist and make choices in your life. What's even more creative is making deliberate choices and then observing the effects. Of course, there are the traditional arts in which many people are enriched. But it's important to remember that creativity, the ability to branch out cross categories, think in a multidisciplinary way, perhaps, and to apply the knowledge, what is accumulated so far, to a given task or situation. That is creativity, and anyone can apply it. I would say, taking a step further, that if anyone wants to be creative in any given medium, this is coming back to what I said at the beginning, you can do that. You can do that if you want to. And wanting to is a big part of it. The desire is a big part of it. If you want to do something or make something creative, you can absolutely do it. And you might have to expand your self-image and approve of yourself in doing that. You might have to allow yourself to do it, to expand, to possibly tune out the opinions of others or the perceived opinions of others. You have to tune out the counterproductive fear and anxiety that may occur from branching out and trying new things. Allowing your learning and creativity to expand out in an unlimited way, unhindered by the self-image, or at least the limited self-image, and instead use the expanded self-image of I can, established by oneself, from within oneself, philosophically. And this is why philosophy and introspection can be very important and empowering if one is taking that in a constructive direction. Self-image, learning, and creativity. Open your mind to what you're capable of. Experience the freedom of knowing that you can. This has been the Studio Shangri-La podcast. Thanks for listening. You can also check out the website studio-shangri-la.com